Michelle. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good, Sammy. How about you?
I am doing excellent. Thank you very much for joining us today. I remember
Great.
from the pre-pod time that I have been so excited to talk to you. And I've been waiting for today, waiting for our session together.
Me as well. I'm very excited to be joining you today.
Thank you. Hey, listen, before we proceed, just for our audience perspective, do you mind introducing yourself and just letting us know who you are and what you do?
Wonderful. So I am Michelle Shepherd. I am based in Canada on Vancouver Island, and I am currently the Vice President of Success, Customer Success at a technology company.
If I was to dive in to ask you what your current leadership style is, what would you say?
I would say servant leader is probably the best way to describe how I lead. It's really important that my team knows that, yes, I have to drive things strategically, but I'm also there to work side by side with them. And that's how I make all the decisions I do as a leader is, am I serving them as their leader, but also helping drive through the business?
Very interesting. And has it always been the case for you, or did it change at some stage?
I would say it's probably what I was doing intuitively. I would say as a leader when I was younger, I tried to match the style of people around me and didn't feel I was leading authentically. And then when I stepped back and said, okay, who do I want to be as a leader? And then started to lead naturally that way, that made a huge difference. And it changed how I lead, how I became a leader, and then how I led teams. And I think it made a bigger impact on my team at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And so, when we had the pre-pod, you mentioned that you are an introvert.
Yes.
Did you have to change your leadership style at any stage to align with your personality? Or was that natural?
I would say once I leaned into my introversion and looked at it the way, okay, understanding who I am as a person and not trying to be somebody different, it really helped me be a better leader. Because I could then understand, okay, what do I need? And what do I need to do during my day, for example? So I know that a day of meetings, for example, can be very draining for me. So I balance my schedule a different way where I'll use an example. I used to do one-on-ones all in one day. That was exhausting for me. The people at the end of my day didn't get the best me. So now what I do is I do it across the week at more in the mornings or at times which work naturally for me. And that has made a huge difference in how I lead.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Because the reason I asked you the question is I've always been a believer that I'm an extrovert.
Okay.
And in my, giving away my age a little bit here, in my late 30s, I'm starting to realize that that's not the case anymore. So I think somewhere I had a shift. I know that I would be quite happy just reading a book.
Yes.
But I could do that for about a week and then I go, okay, I need to grab some energy, meet people, do something, get that energy, channel it, and then go back into being me.
Yes.
And I was really, really curious to see what your, thinking has been around that. That have you been always that person, or did you see that as you, as you are, as we get older, things have changed in some or the other way?
Yeah, so I would say that's a really good question. Growing up, I actually thought there was something wrong with me because I didn't necessarily want to be around people all the time. And I found it overwhelming to be around people. So when I sat back and really started to dig into, okay, what does it mean to be an introvert? And how do I get energy? because I'm similar to you. I like to be out with people. A lot of people look at what I do for a living. They're like, well, if you're an introvert, how do you do what you do? And I
Yeah.
said, well, I balance my schedule because I love being around people. But I also need to step back and find that energy, whether it's just being, like you said, reading. Is
Yeah.
it listening to a podcast, going for a walk? It's just not being around people all the time and knowing when to step away, energize, and then get back. And sometimes that could mean even an hour in my day. I need to take an hour out at lunchtime, get out for a walk, not talk to anybody, get that energy back up, and then go on with my day. It's taken many, many years for me to figure that out
Yeah.
and be okay with it, and be okay to say to people, okay, we've been together all day. I now need to step back and get some of my energy and take time for me.
That is so interesting because
Yes.
I find I don't struggle with saying that to people as much now because I think I've just, kind of organically become a confident person or close to that confidence where I think I know who I am now. Of course, there's that evolving that will happen as we age. I think that's just,
Yes.
it's got to happen as we are humans and we are living in this world. Um, but yeah, it's quite interesting. I now feel that I'm quite happy just being calm and quiet, just like you. And if I'm with people too much, I just go, yeah, no, this is not working for me. It's too much energy. That's
Yes.
just, I just need to reflect on things and go from there.
Definitely.
So, talking about your childhood, you've got siblings?
I do. I have a
You do?
younger brother. Yep. 2.5
Yeah,
years younger. Yeah.
beautiful. And is he like? Are you? Do you guys get along really well?
Yes.
Have you?
Yes. Yeah. He's an amazing person. He has a great career of his own, and he's one of those people that we may not talk all the time,
Yeah,
but I know that if I reach out, he's there for
he's there.
anything that I
Yeah,
need. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got really close friends like that too,
Yeah.
and have that relationship.
Yes.
Growing up, were there any? And this is more like a parent question, I think,
Yes.
from my perspective as a parent. Um, Growing up, were there any strong traits or things that was said to you that shaped you in your adult life? As parents, we say things, right, to kids.
Yes. Yeah.
What was that like?
I would say I had two amazing parents. My mother passed away about 5 years ago now from Alzheimer's.
I'm sorry to
But I
hear.
would say they were two very different parent styles. So my mom was very much, I would say, the servant leadership I get from her. She was very focused on people, making sure people felt welcomed and loved, and taken care of. My dad, on the other hand, was a very strong businessman. He was in financial services for his entire career, and he taught me to be independent. So to what it meant to be a leader, what it meant to be able to take care of myself, set goals and attain those goals. So I was very fortunate to have two opposite parents, I would say, that, but also taught me both great leadership skills in different ways.
Wow, very interesting. And what do you think they were? What were they, if you had to just think back to it, what
Yes.
were their core leadership traits that you maybe are applying in your life right now?
Yeah. I would say my listening. My mother was a great listener. She asked a lot of questions. She was also naturally a fixer.
Yeah,
And
right.
those are all things, if you ask me what kind of role that I love to do, I love to get in and fix things in different jobs. And that's what I've done all along my career. And I really think that came from her.
Yeah.
Where from my dad, I think the logical, rational, how do we plan things out comes from him. And I think those have helped me build my leadership traits and skills.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those things because I sometimes reflect back to my childhood, and there are so many things I think mom and dad were teaching me at the time that I didn't appreciate then, but they
Yes,
come back now. And I kind of go, oh yeah, I understand. As soon as I became a parent, I
yes,
think it just I could just apply to that to
yes,
my life, I think.
definitely. And I think many things come out of my mouth, even like not only to my kids, but to my like the people that I work with and work for. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like my mom, or that sounds like my dad. Um, and or I
Yeah,
remember
that's
them saying
amazing.
that to me, and it now makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
wow. It's
yeah,
it's it's amazing, isn't it, how it all happens. It all comes back,
it is.
and it comes back in all that strong wisdom from our parents, and that we can take away
Oh,
and
definitely.
apply to a life. Oh,
Yes.
wow.
Yeah.
Michelle, thank you for giving me that and opening up, about your life. I wanted to deep dive about your career, and sorry, I'll probably rephrase that. So I wanted to deep dive in your career, at the moment where you are, and some of the challenges that you've faced. My first question around that is, do you remember of any unique challenges that you faced as a female leader rising to executive position, especially in a male-dominated industry, which I believe you happen to be?
Yes.
Um, and how did you navigate them?
Oh, that's a good question. So there have been different challenges. I think there's been a couple. I remember I was progressing in my career, and one of the other male leaders said, well, she hasn't been here long enough to progress as quickly as I was progressing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I appreciated about the time is the leader that was my sponsor and mentor as I was progressing said, well, you're only looking at one part of her career. You're not looking at everything she's done. You're only looking at what you know of her here. And it shouldn't matter how long she's been here. It matters at the skill that she can do, and can she do the job. And it was interesting because when I step back and be honest, I'm
Mm.
thinking, would they have said that about a man?
Yeah,
Right?
very
Like that's
interesting.
what went
Mm.
through my head. Now I was very fortunate that the people that were looking at me for that role were able to look at the sum of all my experiences to understand why I was progressing so quickly. So that's been very fortunate for me. I think the other thing that I found a challenge, and it's been said a few times, I'll be in a meeting and I tend to be on the quieter because of my introverted side. I sometimes don't say a lot, but when I do, I try to make it impactful.
Mm.
And I remember I was in a meeting one time, and we all had strong opinions within that meeting. And somebody told me I was being bossy. I was the only female in the meeting, and all the men around me were having similar, stronger, even maybe louder opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And it really upset me that somebody said I was being bossy because they didn't say it to anybody else.
Yeah.
And I went through the meeting, didn't say anything in the meeting, and I called the person afterwards, and I said, "Do you understand what you said to me in that meeting?" And he didn't realize he had done anything wrong. And I said it was very inappropriate to say I was being bossy.
Mm.
And that's happened a few times where, it's been you're being bossy, you're being aggressive. Um, but they'll never say that. Like, I've never been in a meeting where they'll say that to my male counterparts. So I find that a challenge. I find it's getting better, but it still happens.
Did you? How did you handle that sitting in that room? Were you? Did you
I was
reply
angry.
back in any? Yeah,
I was very
of
angry.
course.
I'm sure I tend to get very red when I get angry, so I'm sure that you could see it in my
You can see
face.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Um, I decided not to engage during the meeting because that wasn't going to help anybody, and then that would just go to the preconceived notion that I was being aggressive or bossy. but I dealt
Mm,
with it afterwards.
yeah, look, yeah, I don't understand, and I would not fathom the mindset of people. And this
Yes,
happens more commonly
it does.
in workplaces,
It does.
and women get tagged as, like you said, bossy, and males who are assertive, oh, they're just males, they're doing their job.
Yes.
Why this? Did you have any male, uh, did you have any female in the room present at the time who could sort
No,
of back you up a bit?
it was just me.
You
Yeah.
were there. Hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Did things
And now
change
there's
at
been
any
other times
stage
when there
after
have
that?
been other females in the room. Um, the person was more careful, but it's happened many times when there have been other females in the room, and that upsets them as well, right? Um, so it
Yeah.
depends. As I've gotten older, I'm more comfortable with calling it out.
Yeah.
But when you're younger and earlier in your career, and depending on who's in the room, um, you're afraid to say something. But I'm at the point now, I need to stand up for myself in an appropriate way. To call it out in
Mm.
front of everybody else, not like, it's knowing when to have the conversation, and when to, like, it's not going to benefit me or anyone else if I do it in a room full of other people.
So, Michelle, if this was happening to someone right now, what advice would you give them? What could they do?
I would say to make sure you manage it afterwards in a private setting.
Hmm.
Because sometimes people realize they're doing it, sometimes they don't, right? But if you were to do it to address it in front of a group of people, it may not be the best. It won't always reflect well on you as a person, right? And for example, if I was to say something wrong to someone, whether intentional or not intentional, I would rather that person talk to me privately and give me the opportunity to apologize and to correct my behavior. Whereas if
Mm.
you do it very publicly, people can get their backs up very quickly.
Yeah,
And
right.
I think it's better for you to do it in a private setting. Yes, it's upsetting because everybody else has heard it at that time, but I think it's a more appropriate way to do it, and in the long
To
run
address it. Yeah.
benefits you doing it that way, right? It's respectful.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest way. Is for me, I want to be respected, and that's how I would want somebody to deal with it. Therefore, that's how I deal
Really interesting, Michelle.
with it.
Do you think it's getting better out there, though, given that there are more women in executive positions, really senior positions? Is it getting better? Or do you think it's still, there's a long way to go from
I
where
think
we
I
stand?
I think we have a long way to go.
Mm.
There are days that I think it's getting better, and then days I think we're regressing. I think when women are willing to lift other women up, that is when I see it's getting better. When I see women trying to take on the male characteristics that could be like historically male, or treating other females by not lifting them up. I call it the mean girl acts.
Mm.
When I see that, that is when I get frustrated and think we haven't made it far. I think it's really important as women that we're lifting other women up, no matter what they're doing, whether they're our
That is so
peers,
true.
their leaders. It's so important these days that we do that and take the time to celebrate other people's wins.
That is so true. So, my next question then, probably a good segue, because I wanted to ask you this as well. You may have seen both sides. You may have seen a bit of mean girl behavior and you are someone who is driven, you are
Yes.
kind, and you have that, that leadership style, which is very much of a listener. Now, you may have people or women in general, who aren't a fan, right? Or they are. Have you met both sides? Has it happened to you?
I have met both sides. I used to take it very personally if somebody didn't like me. And that's not to say I don't today.
Yeah.
And somebody, a coach gave me some really good feedback once. And she's like, not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody is going to be your cheerleader. And you need to be okay with it.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that it's a reflection of you as a person. It's a reflection of them. And they said, what kind of person do you want to be and how will you deal with that in that moment? And that, I have good and bad days with that. But I need to remember at the end of the day, am I happy with the person who I am and how I've dealt with the situation?
Mm.
And anything beyond that is a reflection of that person. Not always an easy thing to do, but
it's not. No, you're right.
Yes.
And we are all different in the way we handle it as well.
Correct.
And some of my chats in a podcast as well, this has been one of the common questions on how they would handle these challenges and different kinds of challenges around that, I guess. And this is a big one because I feel everyone is different. And I think it's quite liberating from that perspective going, look, not everyone is going to be my friend. Not everyone is going to like me, and that is okay.
Yes.
And it's actually funny we are talking about this because I've struggled with this notion myself up to a very, as far as I can think back to, even growing up. And probably around the early 20s, I started to change the narrative. That it made sense that people that I was surrounded by, it wasn't working for me. And I always used to blame myself for it.
Yeah.
In a way. And I was like, oh, what have I done? Or what could I have done differently? And every time there was pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really hard sometimes, like in like both personal and professional, because as humans, we want to be liked.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. So
yes.
it's that. And
It's
I remember, like people have said to me, in all honesty, you don't like everybody, so you can't expect everybody to like you.
Like you.
Right?
Yes. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Right. So it's a learning. It's hard. And, I have to remind myself quite often. But I'll tell you, it's freeing when you can step back and just say, okay,
yes.
this is who I am, and be happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, with yourself, you did say that you had a coach.
Yes.
Was it sort of a mentor relationship with the coach, or did you hire the coach at a certain point in your career to go, okay, I need to work on myself? That somewhere there is that acceptance that I need to have within me.
Yeah. I've done both. I've had mentors, I've had sponsors, and I've had paid coaches.
Yeah, right.
And I've had a few paid coaches that have come in at different parts of my career and different parts of my life. That person was maybe for a short period of time exactly what I needed. Mm-hmm. And I made sure as I was going into that coaching that it was a good fit. And I think sometimes people don't take the opportunity to say, is it a good fit for me? I interview them as much as they interview me as I'm going into it. And I've had some really good ones. And I have the mentality, I always can come away with one or two things in a session from a coach. And that has really helped me develop and grow in my career, especially in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 roles that I've had, is I've been really intentional about that.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
If you had to tell our listeners, what do you look for when you hire a mentor or a coach? What are the, say, top 3 traits that we all need to look for? Because I've done mistakes before, and that's why I'm asking that question.
Yes. So I'm going to break down the coach versus the mentor. Because a mentor for me is usually someone within the organization, or I can even talk to you about, I have a bit of a board, I call it a board of directors, and that's the people I go to who I trust.
Yeah.
So for my coach, it depends on what I want to work on. So if I'm working on some personal things, so we'll use the example. Sorry, I just lost this. We'll use the example of the being liked. That took a very specific coach who could really dig in, ask me some difficult questions. She had earned my trust to ask those questions and to challenge me, and she didn't let me get away with stuff. And really dug deep and had me doing some self-reflection. But we had built that kind of trust, right? And it's earned both ways. So I think that was important at that time. And I've had coaches where I've had one or two sessions and I knew it wasn't going to be a long-term relationship. And I was okay stepping back to say, you know, you're great at what you do, but it's not a fit for me. From a mentor perspective, I've had some great mentors in my career who have worked within the organizations that I have worked in. And what I appreciate about them is they ask me the difficult questions. Okay. And when I've mentored too, so I had a couple mentors that said, okay, I'm good to mentor, but if I give you recommendations on things to do, I expect that you're going to go do them. Okay. And they would also
holding you accountable.
Holding me accountable, and they would expect me to come with an agenda, right? So what did I want to talk about? And those were the best relationships because you need to be coachable when you're working with a mentor and go in with that openness. And through that, I was able to really grow because sometimes it would be as simple as, I'd like you to reach out to this person and find out about what they do, what their organization, or I want you to go do some research on something and come back to me with a proposal. Wasn't anything going to get me anywhere, but it helped me do some thinking and reflection and also dig in a little bit more into the organization in an area that I wouldn't have. What I also find important is I have what I call my board of directors. So if I'm ever making a decision, they are people that know me well, know my strengths, know my weaknesses, will ask me the difficult questions, will challenge me, and just make sure that I'm thinking through any decisions that I make. And, I have different people. Sometimes I use all of them. Sometimes I pick and choose depending on the situation. But they are people that I know, and it doesn't have to be a career decision. It could just be, okay, I'm dealing with this kind of situation. Am I looking at it properly? Do I need to come at it a different way? And I'll tell you, that has been hugely beneficial because it's challenged me on times because they're like, no, you're overreacting, right?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, right.
Do you think about it this way? I have one of those people will say to me, what is the story that you're telling yourself? Because oftentimes as humans, we build up this huge story that's not even true. And when she says that to me, I'm like, okay, it is a story, and I haven't validated that what I'm thinking is correct. And it makes a huge difference because oftentimes I'm really bad at it. I've got this whole story built up in my head about what's going on. But then when I actually ask the questions, that person wasn't thinking any of those things. It was all internal to me.
Oh, wow. That's empowering, isn't it?
Yes.
The internal dialogue that we have.
100%. Yeah.
So how did you, okay, let me frame it this way. Mm-hmm. I probably should have asked this question earlier in a conversation when you mentioned this. So you did say that you struggled a tad bit growing up.
Yes.
What was that struggle and why was it there? Was it sort of self-esteem growing up that, and then at what point did you say that I want to work on this?
Yes.
Tell me.
I would say, so growing up, when you're an introvert, right, and you're in high school, let's use high school for an example.
Oh, yes. Yep.
The hardest time to be an introvert, right? Because people think because you're maybe on the quieter, more reflective, they think, okay, she's a snob, right? Not knowing it takes everything you have to put yourself out there with a group of people, right? Or you've got people that want to be, and friends that want to be going all the time because they're introverts and they want to be out with people. And you're going, I've been with people all week. I went to school. I had a part-time job. I just want to come home and be by myself. And then saying that, people don't always understand it. And at the time, I didn't understand. That's what I needed. And in my head, I thought there was something wrong with me because all my friends wanted to go out and do things. And I'm like, I'm tired. I just want to go home and read a book and just be by myself.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time. Like, I would say it took me probably till the last 10 years to fully understand and be okay with that. But as a teenager and in your early 20s, it's really difficult because there's expectations, whether real or perceived, on what you should be doing at those times of your life, right? And when you're not doing that, you feel like an outsider. So oftentimes I felt like an outsider, but I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just because I didn't understand who I was and I was trying to be what everybody else was.
Very interesting. Really, really interesting. And I think introvert is a term it's misconstrued a bit. I don't think people understand it fully either.
Yes.
I think it's way bigger than a personality trait.
Correct.
You know,
and you said it like a lot of people think being an introvert means that you're shy or you don't have a voice. That's not what it is at all. And you mentioned it. It's like, sometimes you just want to read a book, but then after you've done that for a little while, you want to go out and get some energy from people.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what it is. It's how do you get the energy and where do you need to, how do you rejuvenate? Some people rejuvenate by being around more people. Others need that alone time. It doesn't mean, because somebody recently said to me about being a type A personality, and you can't be a type A personality as an introvert. And I said, oh, yes, you can. I said, I am a type A personality, 100%. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with where do I get my energy and how do I look at things. I will never be the noisiest one in the room. I will usually be the quietest, to the point that sometimes people think I'm not engaged. But I'm so intent on listening and synthesizing the information that is not until, I finally do speak, they understand. But I make sure that people do understand. Just because I'm quiet doesn't mean I'm not interested. Right? Because that was often a misconception. I remember one time I was in a meeting and there was lots of noise going on and people were trying to figure things out. And we took a break and the leader in the room pulled me aside and she said, like, are you not interested in this? And I said, no, I'm interested. I said, I'm listening to everybody and like pulling all the information together. And I said, so when I have something to ask, I'll ask it. I said, but so far I haven't. So, afterwards, later on in the meeting, I did ask a question. She finally got the fact I was taking it all in.
Yeah.
I just didn't.
I'm like that.
Yeah. And sometimes that's hard for people to understand. And people will say, well, ask them if you've got somebody in the meeting, you need to like call them out and, ask them to say something. In my opinion, that's the worst thing to do to me. Like, don't call me out in a meeting because you think I'm not paying attention. I will get like, not nervous isn't the right word. You'll catch me off guard. And that's when I know that you think I'm not paying attention. But just give the space to allow people to talk.
Exactly. And not everyone is going to be the same.
Right.
I find that, it's such a basic thing, but I feel like it's lacking out there. Not everyone is same. I don't have to ask the same question that somebody else is doing because I think differently.
Exactly. And that makes the best teams, right? Is having that diversity within teams. If you have all the same people, there's not going to be a lot of innovation there. But the
Absolutely.
more diversity in everything, thought, personality, culture, everything makes a huge difference.
100% agree. My next question is exactly a segue from what you just said,
Okay.
talking about diversity. Okay, now this is coming from my personal observation and what I have seen happening in Australia. Some people may think it's a bit controversial, but I say maybe it's not out there because organizations sometimes do not explain their decision making on what I'm going to ask you next.
Yep.
Now, I feel with the diversity talk around the world, I have seen this happening that positions are filled based on diversity or having diverse teams from many aspects, not just gender, instead of focusing on the core skill set that a person might bring.
Yes.
Have you seen that happening, and what are your thoughts on it?
So yes, and I find it interesting because depending on what country you're in, it can be looked at differently,
Yeah.
right? So I think we're probably similar in countries, right? In where
Yes.
we're going.
Yeah.
And I think how I look at it is, yes, there needs to be diversity. And my question would be, would they have even looked at a diverse candidate if they hadn't been told they need to? And very rarely have I seen where that candidate didn't end up being the best choice for the job. Right? So how I look at it is, again, because oftentimes it's human nature. You hire people that are similar to you, have similar work traits, all that kind of stuff. Where I think when you do have those diversity, if you want to call them targets, whatever, it just opens it up for people to look at their hiring differently. And I've seen positive impact it can have. People just need to get around the fact that it was because who's to say that that person wouldn't have got hired anyway? I think sometimes where I do find it is people assume they get hired only for that reason, not looking at everything else. I just think it forces people to look at things differently. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, right. Okay. From your perspective, from a senior leader that you've got incredible experience for all those years. What do you think is the formula for success? Something that worked for you. Would you like to share that with our audience today?
Yeah. I think one of the things, especially if you're thinking about going into leadership, is be a leader without having the title. Because a lot of people think they need to have the title in order to be the leader. And what I say to people often is, how can you be a leader in the space that you're in now without having the title? And you can show people how you're leading in that way and that you don't need a title to do it. I think that's one. I think number two is understanding what you want to do or what skills do you want to learn. Because if you look at my career, there's been times I did a lot of lateral moves. I knew because of my personality, I didn't want to be a subject matter expert in one area. I wanted to be a generalist in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of times I would either take a step back or a lateral move to gain more experience. And people need to be okay with that. You don't always have to do, the ladder as we refer to it, right? It's what kind of experiences do you want to gain to get you to either your next role or to things that you want to do in the future. And that has allowed me to have such a wide variety of career experiences that I wouldn't have been able to have if I hadn't had that mindset.
Very interesting. How, actually, before I ask you my next question, so
Mhm.
you talk about leader without a title.
Yes.
Now, say if someone isn't given that responsibility yet, they may be, they may be aspiring to be in the middle management,
Mhm.
but they haven't really got that official, title yet.
Yes.
Do you mind elaborating on what you mean by this, lead without a title? Are you saying take ownership of what you do and do it well?
Yeah, you could take ownership of what you do. You could, you could be doing mentoring with people on your team just naturally,
Yeah,
right? Or, offer to own something that maybe that leader has a responsibility for and say, hey, I'd like to learn this. Let me do it. And, be that person. So you might be, say it's an operational task per se, right? That the leader
yeah,
needs to do. And you're the one getting all the information together, kind of working with the team on that. So you're being the leader within that specific thing
hmm
and making sure that the team is doing that, right? I think because then that gives people the opportunity to see what skills that you have, where your passion is, because oftentimes people think they want to be a leader because of the title. You should
mm,
never go after a role, in my opinion, because of the title. Because oftentimes you need to really want to have passion for people
yeah,
when you're a leader to be a really good, effective leader. And I've seen many people that even do that. They lead without the title and they don't want to progress. They're happy to be coaching, mentoring, helping people. But that's
mm,
when I hire, that's what I look for. Not only what does their resume look like,
yeah,
but
interesting.
how
Okay.
have they been leading in their role? It doesn't even have to be, are they taking on extra responsibilities for something else that is of an interest to them? That kind of stuff. I find that is where I see leadership skills is when they're doing it without a purpose in mind.
Very interesting. My next question, probably related to your point you were making just now. How do you manage your deliverables versus leading a team versus managing upwards?
Mhm.
I find a lot of people struggle with it. And I've seen this happening in my corporate career. Some are great at managing both ends, like one
Yes.
of my mentors I was talking about, who I spoke to 2 days ago. And there are some that miserably struggle leading team downwards, but they are great at managing upwards. They'll be your tick yes master. Yeah, I'll get it done. No problem. And then the team gets pressured
Yes.
because they are overcommitting and they're wanting team to over deliver.
Yeah. I would say I have good and bad days with it.
Yeah.
I do really try to protect my team from what I call fire drills. I try to be always thinking ahead. Okay, what could the leaders above me need?
Okay.
So I'm trying to anticipate that. So it's not a fire drill. Okay, knowing we've been talking about, say, X, we need to do 1, 2, and 3. So the team is prepared for that. Obviously, that doesn't always work, but it's setting expectations with the leader and say, okay, is it something we need today? Can it wait a couple days because there's other deliverables and items going on right now? Or
hmm
do I need to help the team reprioritize and say, okay, I understand you were working on this, put that down for a day. I need you to focus on this and then pick it back
Right.
up again.
Understand.
My job is always to make my leaders look good, but also be the champion for my team and making them look good. Right. So it's, and sometimes it could mean rolling up the sleeves and digging in with them to help that happen. But it's balancing. It becomes, like you said, it's an art of balancing both.
It is. Yes.
And I'm going to be honest, some days I do better than others. But I
Yeah.
always try to think about that as we're working on through things.
This is awesome, Michelle, and I love that tip. So if I summarize that, it is about being proactive and really finding or thinking ahead what execs might need,
Yeah.
and then going, okay, we channel it or funnel it through to my team and then reprioritize and work out what works. I think this could be an amazing tip for someone who is in a leadership position and is sort of, trying to figure their way out. At the point that you said before about leading without a title,
Mhm.
how can someone stop their ego being attached to a title? And as I'm pretty sure that would happen, right? They have their egos intertwined with what they
Yes.
have. Oh, I'm this. This is my title. And suddenly, if you take that title away, they won't know what to do with themselves. Have you been through those times yourself?
I have been, and ego is the best way to say it because it is very personal. Your ego can be driving things, and it's sometimes stepping back and saying, okay, yes, it's impacting me personally. Yes, oftentimes, especially when with that title, it's what do other people think, right? And it's stepping back and being okay with, well, number one, it's nobody else's business, right? Sometimes. And it's, for me, it's okay, what do I want in my career? And driving towards that. It takes me a lot. And sometimes I said this to once, you need to allow me time to grieve, right? Because it is personal. I need that time to be able to reflect and move on. And then you have to move on, right? Because let's be honest, in corporate, titles change all the time. We have internal titles, we have market titles. And it's learning to say, okay, I need to be okay with what I'm doing and what I'm accomplishing as a person. And that title is only one part of my job. It's not who I am. And I think that's probably where I was trying to get to. The title doesn't define me.
Okay.
Right.
So your focus is personal growth.
Yes.
Over the title.
Right. And when I can step back and do that, then that is when I'm most effective.
Interesting.
Because my job is just one small piece of who I am. I've actually had people say to me, because I have a VP title, oftentimes when I'm in social situations, people will ask me what I do. Very rarely do I use my title.
Really?
And I will say...
What do you say?
I say I get the opportunity to lead an amazing team of customer success partners in a technology space. And then they want to know more about what that means. And I remember somebody saying to me, they're like, Michelle, we didn't even realize what you did or what your title was because you've never said it. And because somebody had asked me, like, what is your actual title? And the person sitting beside me, she's like, I've known you for 6 months and I had no idea that was your title. And I said, but again, it's not who I am. Yes, it's my job title, but I said, I'd rather you understand what I do because that is more important to me than my title. It's taken me years to get to that, but it was so interesting because I didn't even realize I was doing it.
This is brilliant. What a brilliant piece of advice, Michelle. I even never thought about this. You know what funny part is now? I remember somebody I met years ago, and they just said, was it on LinkedIn that I was looking at something, or I met? To be honest, I cannot remember. It was years ago. And I remember somebody doing the same thing. They said that I add value, in teams, and they were really senior like yourself, but they never said it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, interesting. I want to understand the thinking process behind it. And now it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you don't want your I repeat that. You don't want your ego connected to what you are doing. And your focus is making a difference in what you are doing, focusing on it, and also growing with it.
Right.
And leaving your impact.
Yes. That is it, exactly. Yeah.
Michelle, I can't thank you enough today. I have learned so much today with this interview, and I really hope our listeners have great takeaways today. If they are, aspiring to grow in their career, get into leadership positions, I reckon they've got to listen to this.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. It was so much fun, and I enjoyed being with you. So thank you for having me on the show today.
My absolute pleasure. I had a lot of fun too.